Hey everyone, I'm starting off today's video with an apology. You're going to see me starting to weigh out this soap, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second, and you'll see my table quakes coming up. But part of the video is missing. We just lost the footage. Long story, but in two places. One of them's quite significant, you'll see in the beginning here, and the other one is really kind of minor because you still see me doing the same work on a different crystal, on a different soap. But we're making emerald crystals, and I'll try to fill in the gaps with what I do. And later I will do another of the same type of crystal, but probably a different color. I'm thinking amethyst because that's a pretty popular crystal, and it will give you the basic idea. I'm doing two soaps, even though you see one loaf mold there. You'll see another one coming out soon. And this is because I kind of wanted to show you two types at once because I'm doing a custom order. One of them is kind of an experiment, altering, well, they're all altering my original design for this customer, which, I mean, I do on many occasions. I don't always take that on, but this was very doable. So I'm making a smaller version of my Crystals Rock soap, which I did include one of the originals in my pictures at the end. But they're all a little smaller. We're going for a little bit smaller size and weight for these. And I'm also trying a couple of different shapes. I love to experiment and play around with my original designs, and especially when it comes to crystals, I really, really like to play with them. There's crystals come in many shapes and sizes, and even within the same type, you will see different colors, different shapes, different formations, mixed with different rocks, different inclusions, etc. So I kind of like to play with that. You see grade A all the way to, well, I don't know, grade D starts just looking like a rock in my opinion, but you see a variety of types. You see rough cut, you see tumbled, you see faceted and polished, and there's so many different options in there. I do like to play with those. I always look those up when I'm designing a crystal in my head and I'm trying to, get an idea of what I need to do. I start off by researching. I do a lot of research. Google images. I Google, and then I play around with the wording so I can check out a variety of types of the same crystal. I want to see every different kind. What would be the best that would make a user-friendly soap, but also a beautiful soap. And sometimes I'm going for a more polished look. Other times I'm going for more of a realistic stone look. So the little sheets, little pieces you see me putting in there, or you saw me putting in there a second ago, that was really how I got started using soap sheets like I used in my chiffon rainbow soap and my silk rainbow soap. That's kind of what started it for me. Crystals have been something I've been doing since not quite day one, but as soon as I got to where I had enough skills to do anything in a loaf or anything mildly complicated, I was like, I have to try crystals. And I researched every crystal video I could find. I played around with it, and they're still one of my favorite things to make. So today you get to see me experiment a little bit with those, with my original design. So the one that you see me still working on, the other one's basically finished, other than I shoved a couple of extra little sheets in there. Those are made to be inclusions. They look like inclusions when you cut the crystal, like you might see when you think about the black little streaks or lines in turquoise. That's an inclusion. You see them in most crystals have them in, some form or another. So that's what I'm using those little sheets for. Anyway, wow, I got off topic there, or just discombobulated with where I was going. The bottom and top of the soap on the left, where you see all the crystals, look like they're hanging down from a cave on one side and growing upward on the other. Those will be the bottom of the soap. Where you saw me a minute ago pouring a lighter, that bright green. By the way, that is all of the colors I'm using today are stained glass from Wholesale Supplies plus stained glass liquid soap dye. And there's that brilliant one. That one is I think it's called Brilliant Lemon Lime. Pretty sure. Brilliant Lemon Lime, and the other one is just called like Lemon Yellow. So you don't want to get those mixed up. I use both in this because I use the Lemon Yellow more in the one on the right, but also in the darker version you see in the one on the left that I'm working on the ends. It just gives it's a different shade of green. It just helps it to kind of make it a little different from this one. The soap in the middle there where you see me pulling, really a lot of the first couple layers I put in there are pretty gelatinous right now. So that's why you see me kind of digging around in there. It doesn't hurt to in a soap like a crystal soap. It really doesn't. Anything that's not a very specific design, things that can be more fluid. I think I've mentioned in many videos, I like designs like that because they give me a lot of wiggle room. I think you just saw me pour some of that lemon yellow in because I'm making more darker green because I underestimated the amount for 2 loaves. You'd think after, I don't know how many years, well, more than 3 years of doing it as a business, which means more than 4 years of making soaps, I'd remember or realize that I have to go more than I think I need to when it comes to overage on the amount of soap. I really try to go a little on the overboard side, and I'm fine if I have a little bit to pour off into a little mold on the side and use it later in another soap. Definitely better than trying to panic at the last minute and heat up some soap and color and fragrance and all that stuff when your soap that you're working on is right in the middle of setting up and you're racing the clock at that point. I hate to do that because it makes me feel very panicky and I don't like that. So anyway, all of the colorants I used, with exception of the crystals themselves, like the little embeds you see there, and the little inclusions, the little sheets. Everything else is the liquid stained glass soap, and it will bleed. Sometimes not as much as you think it will. It really depends. It's helpful to use that in a soap where if it bleeds, it doesn't matter. Like this, it really doesn't. I'm not using orange and green or red and green or colors that will just turn brown. I'm using colors that if they blend, it's fine. They're still green. It still looks like an emerald. Something I know that will maintain the integrity of the soap design is that those crystals have been tossed in enviro glitter, environmentally friendly glitter. It's the kind of mica that they call sparkling mica, and that name again that I still don't know how to pronounce. It just looks like glitter. It's so pretty, but goes very well in soap and works brilliantly like a glitter. I shook those. I do 2 different methods. I've done both. Depends on what I'm making, but I've put them in a baggie and sprinkled some over top and shaken them up. I've put them in a small box that I had, a Sterilite box or plastic box, and shaken them up. And I've also just sprinkled them and kind of stirred it like I think you may have seen me do on screen in a couple of older videos. But those edges, it gets on the edges when you stir it or when you shake it. And it creates the lines of the triangle shapes or the cone shapes or whatever of the crystals you're putting it on. And when and if that soap all ends up being one color, those will still stand out, and they will still, they kind of look like ghost crystals to me because I still maintained the clarity of them. In a little bit, you'll see kind of how I make them with the exception of me putting the glitter on the outside, because that I have not. You'll see toward the end. I'll explain it a little bit more. Oh, real quick, this is one of my tips that one of my followers just mentioned that it was really helpful for her, and it's extremely helpful for me because I have a very bad back and neck and shoulders and all that good stuff. So pushing hard on soap can take its toll when you're unmolding a lot, or if you have hand strength issues. And just a little squirt of alcohol, rubbing alcohol on the sides of the mold as you're before you try to push it out. It makes it come out much easier, at least in my opinion. Okay, what I'm doing here, I'm just kind of eyeballing these because I normally at this point, if I'm doing a loaf soap, I'd be pulling out Uncle Andy's. And I make my bars quite thick, and I usually get 6 bars out of this mold. But I'm going for 5 bars out of this because they're not going to stay bars. These I'm going to be making into my mini crystals rock. So I kind of just did the math with the number of ounces we were going for, the size we were going for with them. And that worked out to be about perfect for that. Having 10 in each. You'll see I cut these pieces in half. And then the other, and this is the bigger part of the experiment, because I knew these would work. I mean, they're basically, they're not quite the same shape I usually use, because I usually cut a very, like there, I'm kind of look and see, can I do my normal? I off center sort of the diagonal. I make a diagonal cut. But these are too small to do that with. So, but it's an easy modification. The other one is easy, but it's just vastly different than what I normally do. I'm going with the second loaf. I'm going to be going for an obelisk look, and we'll talk about more about that when I start cutting that one. But let's see what I left out. I think I didn't even see it happen, but somewhere up there I put the fragrance is Emerald Seagrass. I'm pretty sure that's by Wellington. I will put the link, of course, in my description as always. Oh, right here. Here's an opportunity to go backward a little bit and talk about those crystals I make. You see all this? My leftovers. All the little triangles I'm cutting off. They're all going to be sprinkled with glitter and either shaken in a bag or just stirred, depending on my mood and depending on the look I want. And those will be used in my next soap that uses green crystals. And right now, my only soap using green crystals of this style are emerald. So it will go fine with the fragrance, because I always use that fragrance for my emeralds, no matter what style I'm making. And I will always recycle those in some way, if not as crystals, as something else. But they make the perfect crystal embeds for the next soap that I'm making. There's not, because I'm using the liquid soap dye, the stained glass soap dye, there's not a lot of mica in those, and which is nothing wrong with mica. You know how much I love some micas. But I don't know, it gives a better look to me for the crystals, especially once I coat them in a little bit of the environmentally friendly glitter or the sparkling mica, or whatever you want to call it. Like I think I was explaining earlier, it catches the edge. That's more important than covering them all. You can cover them too much, in my opinion. I've done that, and it's usually worked fine. But the look I like better is to have it have the edges catch it and leave a little bit of open space, because then you put another color or another shade of the same color you're working with, or even just clear soap, and the light still shines through and you see the edges of the crystals. I don't know if you know what ghost crystals are, but look it up if you don't, because they look really cool, and some of these soaps end up with that effect. Hope I'm not repeating myself on that one. But, quickly while I'm finishing these up, this design here that I'm cutting, the actual way to make the loaf soap is really quite easy. I pour a little bit of a color first, of a green, or, depending, a darker green. I do tend to do these dark to light at the top. And I just pour about maybe half an inch to an inch. And really, sometimes I just dump a handful or two of those types of crystals. And then I come back in and pull some of the larger crystals and place them standing up, because it gives that image of them kind of growing upward through the crystal. And then I pour a little bit more. I might sprinkle a tiny bit of glitter or a little bit of mica here and there. And I pour another layer of the clear, and I get lighter as I go to the top with this particular soap. And in between, I'm also adding a little bit of inclusions, whether that's soap sheets or torn up soap sheets. It just, again, it depends on the look I'm going for. So here we are with the second loaf, and I divide. Obviously I cut it in half, and then I'm dividing that into kind of 3 bars. And I'm going for the obelisk look, which is kind of like a tower. I think they might even call them towers sometimes. I don't know for sure. I don't know all of my crystal terminology. I just love crystals. So you see like that. They're long rectangles for right now. And then you'll see I'm going to facet them. The first one I facet here, because I've never done this shape before in a crystal. I totally blow it, but it's okay. It still looks pretty, but it's not the actual look that's usually used to cut these. I'm so used to cutting the corners off, because when you go to facet, you look at things and you're like, okay, well, I don't want any 90-degree angles here. That's a place to make a facet and have it catch the light. Well, on this style of soap, that's the wrong way to go. So it looks okay, but it doesn't really look like what I'm going for. That one's probably going to be mine. It's still a pretty soap. I just don't want it to stand out as different from the rest for the order I'm making these for. So the side, I know a lot of them do not facet the corner, the sides, the tall sides like you saw me just do, but I like that look. I really think it helps it catch the light, and I'm not removing very much. So you see here, I'm doing it correctly on the top. You do it in squares. You put a plus symbol, sort of. You make a plus sign at the top instead of going crossways, and then you cut each piece off go out from that plus sign. And it gives you that point that you're looking for at the top. The other one, I didn't get a point, and it didn't sit right. So it's, it's not like trashed. It's just not what I was intending. And it doesn't look like those standard kind of tower crystals you see. So it just feels weird to me. Like I start to do it wrong a couple of other times and catch myself, because I'm so used to going for those corners. But what was I doing? Oh, yeah. There was one of them I don't know what I was doing. But here you see, watch how thin. I'm not cutting very much off at all. It's just like a really thin place, a thin little corner, and it just catches the light so much nicer. So, but it's not a hard cut. It just took me a while to get used to it. The fun thing about these is you can play with shaping crystals and seeing what cuts you can make, seeing what's easiest for you, what way to do it. You could always take a soap that is a complete disaster that you don't like, and that you don't want to either give or sell, or, obviously something you can use for yourself, but play with it and see what kind of shape you can get out of it that looks like a crystal. It's a good way to practice that. You still have the soap to use at the end, and you have those little chunks. If they're pretty, you can use them in another soap. They most likely will be pretty in something. So that's my, see, I almost cut wrong. Oh, cut myself again. So, anyway, it's a fun way to practice it, and you can see the looks you can get. Some of the soaps, to me, when they're crystals, they don't, if you're just putting them in a loaf or in a mold, like if I'm putting them in the stone mold, which is very rounded, you can get some really pretty looks, but it really amps up the crystal look when you cut and facet it a little bit. because the way the soap settles, it's the cutting into the inclusions and the crystals that are there that really bring out the gemstone look to me. Um, I I think sometimes I have to remember to do it, but I think sometimes if I have a messed up swirl, because you've seen a few of my messed up swirls recently, not messed up, just not what I wanted, that last loaf I made would have made beautiful crystals. And I didn't think to do it until I cut into it. And later I'm like, wow, that looks like it could be a gemstone. I probably should have cut it up, but I didn't. But I will be remembering that from now on and take the time to do some more crystal soaps with swirls, because that's now the second time I've done a soap like that where I went to cut it up for something and I was like, oh, I could have used that as a crystal. So these are, I was also playing with this. I've kind of done this shape a little bit before, just in practicing and playing with soap and playing with cuts. But I think these turned out really cool. Little slabs and gemstone slabs with kind of an emerald cut. I'm sure it's not a proper emerald cut, but it's very similar to the shape they go with a lot for emeralds, but really big. So what I'm going to do with these, I didn't do it on screen because I just decided to the other day, is I think I'm going to cut those in half and facet the ends that I cut so it's all faceted, but I think those will work into the size parameters that my customer and I were talking about. So, yeah, we have a little visit from my boyfriend here. I decided if he is going to play hand signals and I don't know, maybe an episode of Mr. Bill or something, I'm going to leave it in there because it's fun. And it was quick. He didn't take up a lot of time. So these are just close-ups with the alcohol spraying so you can see them. I will try to remember to say that in every one, but it helps the camera pick up the clarity. I started to say earlier and interrupted myself, as I tend to do. The tops of these, where the bright green is, that brilliant lemon lime color, the light is making it kind of cloudy. It is crystal clear. I promise you, they are crystal clear at the top, but it is so brilliant, it kind of reflects the light a little bit. It almost looks like I've used a mica at the top. I don't know if you can see that, but the way the light catches it, it isn't clear on film, but it is perfectly clear. There you sort of saw, I think, it's so bright. It's neon. It's like using tennis ball breaker from Mad MICAS, but in a clear form. It's very brilliant, and that one sort of shows it. It's catching the yellowish from it. It's not quite that yellow. But look how cool I think the obelisk or the towers, whatever you want to call them, I think they came out really cool, really pretty. You see how the inclusions are going through horizontally, and that's why I put them in the way I did, because you have to picture when you're doing a cut in a different way in a mold, you have to picture what direction you're cutting and what is that going to look like when you cut. It's the same for designing any soap in, I love that one. See, that's what I'm talking about when I say ghost crystals. They're clear, but you see the outline of them. Anyway, any loaf soap, you want to think about how you're cutting it and what is it going to look like when you cut through it. It's not just crystals that benefit from having it cut. If you've ever made soaps with chunks, confetti soaps or scrap soaps or whatever, it is its most beautiful where you cut it. The sides that are up against the walls of the loaf usually aren't as pretty unless you're using completely clear soap. There's just something, it just reveals the inside a little bit nicer. So that's just something to keep in mind when you're designing soaps. I will be doing a lot more about how I create and design my crystals in the near future. I have a bunch of crystals kind of slated already, couple already even filmed. And I want you to think like I do. I want you to play, and I want you to research what they look like and think about what technique could I use or what way could I make these look like those crystals. So we're coming up on the pictures from my light box now, and I just want to take the time to say, if you lasted through this whole thing, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It does make a difference with my channel, and I'm hoping that you at least learned something, even though you didn't get the full tutorial for it. That will be coming up in the near future. And like I said, I'll probably try amethyst. Thank you so much for stopping by. Give it a like, subscribe if you haven't. And I hope to see you in one of the soap groups or in the community tab or in the comments if you have questions or comments. Please feel free. Thank you. Have a great day. Bye.